The framework of these mediums, there is no sense really in talking about categorical differentiation between 2- and 3-dimensionality. Instead, surfaces create necessarily situations of depth, and elevations create by and by more and more surfaces, forms, and platforms. Therefore, the figural dynamics process the field of the res extensa. A complicated issue pertaining to that last suggestion regards the relationship between bodies and things in the figural dynamics. Deleuze, Lyotard, and others emphasize the corporeality of the figure. It is my conjecture that the figural gesture actually distinguishes between bodies and things. But the full clarification of this point should be kept to another occasion. The concept of the figure should be differentiated from the concept of the image. Rather than being an image in itself, the figure enables the formation of images. The figure grounds the image. That is because the figure is not the sheer product of the Einbildungskraft. It exists as a concrete material reality. It incorporates the very repetitive gesture which enables the synthesis of the imagination. This means, by the way, that the figure itself does not have to be seen in order for it to be distinct. By the way, on that point, I have some. I'm found in a polemic with Nancy's concept of the image as distinct. I don't think that images can be actually distinct, but we will have maybe time to think about that in the afternoon. This is why the examination of the figure cannot be carried out within the borderlines of aesthetic discourse. The figure stands at the very place where the synthetic possibility of the imagination is enabled, where Descartes located the sensus communis, and where Kant located what he himself called the figural synthesis. For both Descartes and Kant, there exists a surface upon which the primary inscription of the contact between human and things is registered, just before it becomes a sense perception or an image. Figural cognition activates what may be called synthetic intuition, a term which used Erwin Panofsky in his project of conceiving a model for the iconological method. This synthetic intuition consists of both the presence and the absence of a thing, or as Pascal phrased it in his Pensée, figure porte absence et présence. Figural synthetic intuition works in retrospect after a body has moved. Simply put, it is memory. Not only that the figure should be distinguished from the image, it should be also distinguished from the form. A figure is not a form in the sense of an idea or an eidos. Rather, the figure is the condensed, intensive mode of the transmission of an eidos. A figure occurs when an eidos is transfigured, that is to say, moved, transferred from carrier to carrier, from vessel to vessel, as in the transfiguration episode in the New Testament, when Christ transfigured himself into a vision in the sky. Return to use Aristotelian terminology, I suggest that the figure pertains to the genos rather than to the eidos of the thing. Returning again to Pliny's fable, from the moment the line was drawn on the wall by the amorous girl, what is retained is the reality of the past of her departing love. The girl's father then molded in clay the young man's figure after the outline or the contour of the departing man. While passing from platform to platform, from place to place, the figural delineation proceeds not only forwards but also backwards, not only extending but also contracting, not only expanding but also sinking downwards into the depth of that which was. The figure attests to the fact that some action had a form. An action was made and a thing was produced as the outcome of this formed action. I'm passing to the second, shorter section. The figure and the reality of the past. In this second section, I present in general lines the philological tradition of the understanding of the figure, which on a first glance seems quite distant from the plastic one that we've just met. This philological tradition of the figure stems out of issues encompassing rhetoric and theology. As I have noted above, this tradition is meticulously discussed in Auerbach's essay of 1938. A successful merge of the two poles of the figural structure, the plastic and the philological, may enable a formation of a method which could be termed figural philology, which will synthesize thought, history, and plasticity. The ancient term figura initially appeared in Roman culture of the 1st century BC. Quite quickly, it became a common term referring to rhetoric, and more specifically to language power of persuasion. Throughout the tradition of the definitions of the figure, from Roman times to the 20th century, the assumption has been that language power of persuasion stems not from that which is actually being said, but rather from the formal mechanics of language, such as repetition, metaphors, and phrasing, i.e. from linguistic style. That is, figural language refers to all that is not literal in language. This insistence on the surplus nature of the figural continued to appear throughout the lingual tradition of the figure, most notably in 17th century French theory of rhetoric and linguistics, as well as later in Gérard Genet's 20th century elaboration of this notion. In Christianity, the figure became a theological term, though retaining both the rhetorical and the stylistic character of Roman times. In the prefiguration principle of Christian theology, two sovereign and concrete historical realities are connected retroactively as realizing the same truth. For example, in Christian theology, Joshua is considered as a prefiguration of Christ. Similarly to the plastic model, this structure of Christian prefiguration is characterized by a movement of regressive delineation. This regression allows the figural philolog to read history backwards as real prophétie, in which ancient historical reality is considered as having the same form of a later historical reality. This post factum repetition supports and validates theological acclaimed truth, i.e. Christian salvation. Third part, the figure, plasticity, and the past. What could then be a synthetic model of the figure which would account both for the plastic and the philological aspect of the figure? I suggest that the relationship between the two surfaces, the form and the platform, which exists in the plastic figure, is analogical to the dual structure of the figure as Auerbach presented it. Both cases include an affinity between two realities, an affinity which is the result of a bilateral causality, in which both parties are a priori and a posteriori to each other. And therefore there is no way to determine which is the latter, the primary, and which is the former, the secondary. In both cases, I think I have another, in both cases, thinking the relationship between the two would involve a regressive movement in which we consider one as the cause and the other as the result of or the product. The platform in the plastic figural structure, which we designated also as the prototype, is analogical to a prefigural element in Auerbach's presentation of the figural structure. Retroactively, this platform is registered and realized as the carrier of the truth of the type. The form or the type in the plastic model of the figure is analogical to the later object, supposed later object, which is actually that which the researcher actually encounters. Usually it would be a text or a work of art or an object for the artist. And why do we want to read something? We want to read it in order for it to remain with us, as the departing love of the Corinthian girl. But in order for it to remain, we, as figural philologues, have to regress and determine a prototype. In order for the researcher to start reading regressively the text or the work or the world or the thing or reality, she has to encounter some problem or detail which demands to be defined. Yes? That detail is what Auerbach termed the philological Ansatz, and which was also so central to Abi Warburg's art history. It is a starting point, a fragment of a thing without which there could be no thought process. In order to be able to read, the philologue waves the affinity between the present problem, which is in itself a slice, a fragment of reality, and a former one, giving them both a redefinition or an outline, or as we've said in the beginning, a place. Indeed, for many of the Christian thinkers of the figure, as for Blaise Pascal, the figure is defined as a kind of a message or a code, which can be read only retroactively by the aid of another historical reality. It is as if history reads itself backwards, and this reading itself is the figural structure. In that sense, the later historical reality is being read by the older one, at the same time that the older historical reality serves as the delineator of the later one. But it is only when a problem that an object poses before us that we are actually being sent to read another far and ancient problem. Inasmuch as the historical reality of Jesus helps us to read anew the figure of Joshua, the reality of Joshua serves as the validator of the arrival of Christ, as if to say, the truth was already there, although we did not yet see it clearly. Thus, in history nothing is hidden, everything is revealed, reachable, et donnée immédiate de la conscience, as Bergson would call it. Only that we must purge the instruments in order to be able to read it. It is because of the inherent partiality of our reading ability that the figure appears. Therefore, as you see, I am trying to conceive of a manner in which the plasticity of the res extensa, arriving to us retrospectively in the figural mode, can design for us the principle of a restored humanistic philological rationality and method. Thank you very much. Last sentence. Yeah. Here, an artwork would actually teach the historian not only what was, but also how it has been, or what was its form while it was being produced.